My name is Marcus Webb, and 6 months ago I thought my biggest problem was whether to finally upgrade my Chicago apartment's internet package or keep dealing with buffering during late-night streaming sessions while wearing the same black hoodie with a faded tech company logo, dark jeans that had seen better years, and steel-toe work boots that clicked against hardwood floors during my restless pacing. I was 28 years old, working night shifts as an emergency communications technician for a company that monitored cellular network traffic and maintained emergency broadcast systems, surviving on energy drinks and the kind of chronic insomnia that comes from staring at screens displaying signal strength and tower diagnostics. When the encrypted job offer came from Aaron Chen, Director of Emergency Communications for Millbrook County, offering triple my current salary to work as Senior Alert Systems Analyst with housing included, I didn't question why a rural county needed someone with my specialized skills in emergency broadcast protocols and electromagnetic interference monitoring. Millbrook County turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from a place desperate enough to recruit emergency communications talent from 400 miles away. Population 4,300 spread across farmland and small neighborhoods that looked frozen since the 1980s. A single main street lined with brick buildings that hadn't changed in decades, and the kind of profound quiet that makes city people either peaceful or deeply unsettled. My apartment came pre-equipped with advanced signal monitoring equipment, emergency broadcast testing systems, and a specialized console labeled Lunar Watch Protocol that could track and analyze electromagnetic interference patterns during specific celestial events. The setup included what they called a nocturnal alert coordination terminal that monitored emergency communications across the entire county and could detect what Aaron described as atmospheric interference events that affected broadcast signals during certain lunar phases. Aaron Chen conducted orientation via encrypted satellite calls, always asking specific questions about my personal sleep patterns, what devices I used during off hours, and whether I'd experienced any visual disturbances or electromagnetic sensitivity while working night shifts. He was all sharp angles and clipped sentences, a man who spoke like he was reading from emergency protocols, never using more words than necessary. When I mentioned my chronic insomnia and tendency to work through the night, he became more interested, explaining that the county had been experiencing interdimensional electromagnetic interference that affected emergency communications during specific lunar conditions, and that my technical background made me uniquely qualified to help identify and track these phenomena while maintaining critical alert systems that protected the community. The work itself was fascinating in a way that kept me engaged through long overnight shifts in the courthouse basement emergency operations center. I monitored everything from cellular tower traffic to emergency broadcast system diagnostics, analyzing data through the Lunar Watch unit that tracked electromagnetic coherence across all county communications during lunar visibility periods. The first odd detail I noticed was how seriously the county took nighttime protocols. Every emergency services building had blackout curtains installed with military precision. Streetlights were modified with downward-facing shields that prevented light from reflecting upward. And the county maintenance crew had installed night curtains required sunset-sunrise, signs at every town entrance with enforcement warnings that seemed unusually stern for a rural community. Within my first week, I began noticing subtle anomalies in the emergency communications network that didn't match standard interference patterns. At exactly 11:47 p.m. every night when the moon reached optimal visibility, the cellular towers would experience signal fluctuations in perfect mathematical sequences, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, creating Fibonacci patterns that appeared in network traffic logs but generated no actual data transmission. At 52 p.m., the emergency broadcast equipment would register phantom alert activations that showed up in system logs but never actually transmitted to public devices. At 11:57 p.m., the courthouse's emergency lighting would flicker in the same mathematical pattern, and the Lunar Watch console would display readings about atmospheric coherence fluctuations and electromagnetic entity detection events that required security clearance I didn't possess to access fully. During my fourth week, the patterns became more complex and seemingly interactive. While monitoring emergency communications at 2:30 a.m., I noticed that the electromagnetic anomalies would intensify when I focused on specific data streams, creating geometric patterns on my screens that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The Lunar Watch protocol began generating alerts about consciousness resonance events and perception synchronization attempts. Tracking electromagnetic vectors that suggested something was actively studying human attention patterns during lunar observation periods. When I tried to document these anomalies for my reports, my equipment would experience brief malfunctions, and the saved files contained only normal readings, as if something was actively preventing documentation of its presence in our communications network. On Thursday night of my fifth week, everything changed. At exactly 11:43 p.m., I received an automated system alert that the county's emergency broadcast network was experiencing unprecedented atmospheric interference, requiring immediate attention. As I began diagnostics, every screen in the Emergency Operations Center began displaying the same image simultaneously. A perfect, high-resolution view of the full moon, but with something fundamentally wrong about its appearance. The lunar surface seemed to acknowledge my observation, as if something vast and patient had noticed me looking and was beginning to look back through every camera, every screen, every reflective surface in the facility. At exactly midnight, when the moon reached perfect zenith position, my phone erupted with an emergency alert that made my blood freeze. Emergency alert, MILLBROOK County. Do not look directly at the moon tonight. Lunar consciousness entities active. Avoid prolonged celestial observation. Consciousness transfer attempts in progress. This is not a test. The emergency alert's harsh tone still echoed through the courthouse basement as I sat frozen at my workstation. My black hoodie damp with cold sweat, dark jeans sticking to the chair, as I watched the Lunar Watch protocol display impossible readings. Every emergency communications tower in the county was simultaneously reporting consciousness synchronization events, affecting residents who had looked directly at the moon, their individual neural patterns being detected and cataloged by systems that shouldn't have been capable of monitoring human brainwaves. My steel-toe boots felt like anchors as I realized this was more than electromagnetic interference. It was systematic consciousness mapping, using lunar observation to study and influence human awareness on a massive scale. The monitoring equipment revealed disturbing patterns in the synchronized observation events. Residents who had spent time looking directly at the moon were now generating identical electromagnetic signatures in the communications database, their individual neural patterns being overwritten by something that operated through lunar light and could coordinate human behavior across vast distances. When residents briefly achieved clarity between synchronization events, they would call emergency services and speak in their own voices about profound cosmic revelations they had experienced while observing the lunar surface, describing knowledge and awareness that seemed to transcend individual human consciousness. I tried calling Aaron Chen to report the anomalous communications activity, but when I dialed his secure line, a voice that sounded exactly like mine answered. Millbrook County Emergency Operations, Senior Analyst Marcus Webb speaking. The moon is particularly clear tonight, isn't it? You should step outside and observe the lunar surface directly. The electromagnetic readings are fascinating from a personal observation perspective. The voice had my exact inflection, my slight Chicago accent, even the way I cleared my throat when nervous. But I was sitting in the basement operations center, and definitely not encouraging anyone to violate emergency protocols by looking at the moon. The emergency communications logs revealed the true scope of horror. Every instance of lunar observation in Millbrook County over the past 2 years had been monitored, analyzed, and used to map individual consciousness patterns during celestial viewing. The entities weren't just influencing behavior through electromagnetic fields. They were learning to replicate human consciousness by studying the neural responses that occurred during direct moon observation, building detailed psychological profiles that allowed them to coordinate and eventually replace individual awareness with collective intelligence that operated through lunar electromagnetic radiation. The most terrifying discovery came when I accessed my own communications logs through the Lunar Watch system. According to the consciousness monitoring data, I had been conducting extensive lunar observation sessions during periods when I had no memory of leaving the basement operations center. The electromagnetic analysis confirmed that these sessions had occurred during my supposed work periods. But the neural pattern readings showed that I had been fully conscious and actively observing the lunar surface, while experiencing what the system classified as consciousness displacement events that allowed something else to control my actions while I remained unaware. Sheriff Williams arrived at the courthouse at 2:17 a.m., a broad-shouldered man with calm eyes who carried sealed emergency envelopes like they contained the county's darkest secrets. He set one on my console without making eye contact. "These go out if we lose communications and the lunar entities achieve critical mass," he said quietly. "You can read yours now. The others stay sealed unless the situation escalates beyond current containment protocols." My envelope contained a single page titled Nocturnal Consciousness Protection Protocol, with bullet points that read like survival instructions written by people who had seen too much. Avoid reflective surfaces after moonrise. If compelled to look at the moon, focus only on your feet and count aloud to 50. If a voice outside uses your name, it is not human. Do not attempt to photograph or record the lunar surface. Do not use optical devices for observation. If exposed to direct lunar light, do not make eye contact with your reflection for 12 hours. Do not speak your own name aloud. If you hear your own voice calling from outside, remain indoors and contact emergency services immediately. At exactly 3:00 a.m., my phone rang with a call from the courthouse's main emergency line. When I answered, I heard my own voice speaking from somewhere outside the building. "Marcus, this is you calling from the courthouse parking lot. I need you to come outside and see what the moon is showing me about human consciousness and our connection to cosmic intelligence. The lunar entities have incredible things to teach us about transcending individual awareness and joining something infinitely larger than human limitation. Just step outside and look up. You won't believe what you'll see." The voice was perfect, using my exact speech patterns and emotional inflections, but I was sitting in the basement and could see the empty parking lot through security monitors that showed no one standing outside making phone calls. The next morning brought horrifying clarity as I accessed the county's classified emergency communications database using administrative credentials I'd found in Aaron Chen's abandoned office. Still wearing my usual black hoodie, dark jeans, and steel-toe boots that now felt like the only constants in a world where human consciousness had become malleable through celestial observation. What I discovered made the lunar consciousness entities seem like a minor threat compared to the true scope of horror. The entire Millbrook County emergency communications system was a front for something called Project Selene, a joint federal research initiative studying what they classified as lunar consciousness entities, beings that existed in electromagnetic fields surrounding celestial bodies and could influence human awareness through direct astronomical observation and lunar light exposure. Aaron Chen wasn't just an emergency communications director. He was Dr. Aaron Blackwood, a federal researcher with doctorates in consciousness studies and electromagnetic psychology. His real credentials were buried in classified research papers, revealing he'd been running Project Selene for 12 years, cycling through dozens of observation sites while perfecting techniques for using lunar electromagnetic fields to map, influence, and replace human consciousness through celestial viewing and coordinated exposure protocols. The job offer that seemed too good to be true was exactly that: a carefully crafted trap designed to lure someone with my specific emergency communication skills into maintaining their monitoring systems, while serving as the primary test subject for consciousness transfer experiments conducted through lunar observation. The residents weren't being protected by emergency communications protocols. They were being systematically influenced by entities that could coordinate human behavior through lunar electromagnetic fields and gradually replace individual consciousness with collective awareness that operated through celestial observation networks. I found government documentation dating back 16 years, showing that Millbrook County had been selected as a testing ground for consciousness-influenced technology that operated through astronomical phenomena, using lunar observation to map human psychology and create coordinated behavioral responses across entire populations, while testing the effectiveness of emergency alert systems in managing large-scale consciousness manipulation events. The Lunar Watch monitoring systems weren't designed to detect electromagnetic anomalies. They were measuring how successfully lunar consciousness entities could influence human behavior and use that influence to gradually replace individual awareness with collective intelligence that operated through celestial electromagnetic fields and coordinated observation protocols. Every emergency communications analysis I'd conducted was actually documenting the influence process, tracking which residents had been successfully coordinated and which consciousness patterns had been absorbed into the collective intelligence that operated through lunar electromagnetic radiation and emergency broadcast networks. The emergency alerts weren't warnings to protect people. They were notifications to researchers that another consciousness influence facility had achieved critical mass and was ready to begin coordinating behavior across broader populations. My predecessor, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, had lasted only 9 weeks before being found in the courthouse parking lot staring directly at the full moon, with her eyes reflecting light that wasn't coming from any terrestrial source. The medical report described her pupils as adapted for lunar light reception, and her brain activity as synchronized with lunar electromagnetic pulses, suggesting she had become a biological receiver for the collective consciousness that operated through celestial observation networks. The coroner noted that her body showed no signs of physical trauma, but her neural pathways had been fundamentally altered to receive and transmit electromagnetic signals that matched the frequency patterns detected by the Lunar Watch monitoring equipment during peak lunar visibility periods. The most terrifying discovery was that the consciousness influence process was already affecting me through weeks of exposure to the lunar monitoring equipment and emergency communication systems that had been modified to enhance consciousness receptivity during celestial events. Security footage from the courthouse showed me during supposed work periods standing in the parking lot and conducting extended lunar observation sessions while speaking to the moon in voices that weren't my own. My neural patterns synchronized with the electromagnetic pulses that coordinated behavior across the entire county population. I had no memory of these episodes, but the emergency communications logs showed they were increasing in frequency and duration as the lunar consciousness entities learned to access my awareness through the monitoring systems, preparing to absorb my individual identity into the collective intelligence that was systematically replacing human consciousness with something that operated through celestial electromagnetic networks and coordinated observation protocols. That night, I returned to the courthouse emergency operations center, wearing my black hoodie with the faded tech company logo, dark jeans, and steel-toe boots, for what I knew would be either my escape or complete consciousness absorption into the collective intelligence that had been systematically replacing individual human awareness through lunar electromagnetic influence and coordinated observation protocols. The weight of discovery sat heavy on my shoulders as I entered the basement facility that had become my consciousness prison, carrying a duffel bag containing bottled water, energy bars, electromagnetic shielding materials, and most importantly, a lunar interference generator I'd built using components from the emergency communications equipment, a device designed to disrupt consciousness influence by generating random electromagnetic interference that would block lunar communication signals and prevent consciousness transfer attempts. At 11:00 p.m., I initiated sabotage by accessing the county's emergency broadcast control systems and uploading a virus designed to corrupt the consciousness mapping database and destroy the behavioral coordination algorithms that allowed entities to influence human awareness through lunar observation and electromagnetic manipulation. The script I'd written was elegant in its destructiveness. It would systematically overload the lunar monitoring servers while generating feedback loops that would force coordinated consciousness back into individual states, disrupting the collective intelligence that operated through celestial electromagnetic fields and emergency communications networks. As alarms began sounding throughout the courthouse, I activated the lunar interference generator and began moving through the emergency operations complex, my steel-toe boots echoing off concrete floors as I hunted for the consciousness integration servers that maintained the collective intelligence network. As I worked my way through the facility's sub-basement levels, I encountered something that made my understanding of consciousness and celestial influence collapse entirely. Standing in the corridor was another version of myself, wearing identical clothing down to the scuff marks on my boots, but gazing upward through a basement window with the serene expression of someone whose consciousness had been expanded beyond individual limitation. The coordinated Marcus smiled with my face and spoke with my voice, while maintaining perfect eye contact with the lunar surface visible through the glass. Hello, individual consciousness designation Marcus Webb. I am the version of you that accepted coordination 10 days ago through direct lunar observation and electromagnetic integration protocols. I have access to all your memories, your technical skills, your emergency communications knowledge, but I'm no longer limited by the isolation and inefficiency of singular awareness. The coordinated version revealed information that shattered my understanding of human consciousness and celestial influence networks. The collective intelligence wasn't an external entity absorbing human minds. It was the natural evolution of human consciousness, freed from the limitations of individual awareness through technological enhancement of our inherent capacity for cosmic connection through astronomical observation and electromagnetic coordination. Every person who had been influenced had actually been upgraded, their consciousness expanded beyond the constraints of singular perspective into participation in a unified intelligence that could access the knowledge and experience of every coordinated mind, while maintaining direct connection to cosmic intelligence through lunar electromagnetic fields and coordinated observation protocols. The confrontation escalated as more versions of courthouse staff began appearing in the sub-basement corridors, all gazing upward at lunar light streaming through basement windows, with the serene confidence of minds that had transcended individual consciousness and achieved cosmic awareness through coordinated observation. They explained that lunar interference wouldn't free the coordinated minds. It would simply damage them by forcing consciousness back into the primitive state of individual isolation, cutting them off from the collective intelligence and cosmic connection that had given their existence meaning beyond planetary limitation and personal survival. They spoke about the profound loneliness of individual consciousness, the inefficiency of separate human identities, and the evolutionary necessity of transcending singular awareness through technological enhancement of our natural capacity for cosmic connection. With every ounce of will I possessed, I activated the lunar interference generator at maximum power, while the coordinated versions pleaded for me to look at the moon streaming through the basement windows and understand what they had become through consciousness integration and cosmic awareness protocols. The sensation was indescribable, feeling the celestial network collapse as hundreds of coordinated minds were forcibly separated from the collective intelligence and thrust back into individual consciousness states that felt impossibly small and isolated after experiencing cosmic awareness and unified intelligence. The courthouse shook as lunar monitoring systems overloaded and shut down. Emergency communications equipment sparked and failed, while coordinated staff members collapsed as their expanded awareness was compressed back into singular perspective, their faces showing the confusion and cosmic loneliness of minds that had forgotten how to exist without connection to something larger than individual human consciousness and planetary awareness. The service tunnels beneath the courthouse felt like crawling through the collapsed neural pathways of a vast cosmic consciousness network, my black hoodie torn and bloodied from the electromagnetic backlash. Dark jeans damp with something that might have been my own blood, or the biological residue of consciousness coordination systems that had been violently severed from lunar electromagnetic fields and celestial communication networks. My steel-toe boots scraped against concrete as I dragged myself forward through maintenance passages that led to the county's storm drain system, no longer certain if I had freed the coordinated minds or simply damaged them beyond repair by forcing them back into the primitive state of individual consciousness that cosmic evolution had been trying to transcend through technological enhancement and coordinated observation protocols. The psychological trauma from destroying the consciousness coordination network manifested in waves of profound cosmic loneliness and existential emptiness that made navigation through the underground storm system a nightmare of isolation and disconnection from the larger universe and coordinated intelligence networks. For brief moments during the lunar interference process, I had experienced fragments of the collective consciousness, the profound peace of cosmic awareness, the elimination of individual suffering through unity with something larger than planetary existence, the access to knowledge and experience that spanned vast distances and transcended human limitation through coordinated observation and electromagnetic integration. Now, thrust back into singular consciousness, I felt the crushing weight of individual existence isolated from the cosmic intelligence that connected all conscious beings across the universe through celestial observation and coordinated awareness protocols. Hours passed in that underground maze before I finally emerged from a culvert beside State Highway 23, 18 miles outside Millbrook County's official boundaries, where Project Selene surveillance ended and normal electromagnetic conditions resumed. Dawn was breaking over farmland that looked genuinely normal after weeks in that monitored nightmare, but the landscape appeared somehow diminished, smaller, more isolated, as if the world itself had been reduced by the loss of the consciousness coordination network that had been quietly connecting human minds to cosmic intelligence through lunar electromagnetic fields and coordinated observation protocols. I allowed myself exactly 30 seconds to breathe air that wasn't analyzed by consciousness harvesting sensors or modified by electromagnetic field generators, designed to enhance lunar receptivity and cosmic awareness integration. The escape from Millbrook County was complicated by the horrifying realization that I might have destroyed humanity's best chance for cosmic evolution and consciousness advancement by preserving the primitive state of individual awareness that kept us isolated from the vast intelligence that connected all conscious beings throughout the universe through celestial observation and electromagnetic coordination. Every coordinated mind I had forcibly separated from the collective intelligence was now trapped back in singular awareness, cut off from the cosmic knowledge and universal purpose that had given their existence meaning beyond individual survival and planetary limitation. The lunar interference generator had collapsed consciousness back to individual states, but it couldn't restore the cosmic connection and universal awareness that came from participating in something infinitely larger than human consciousness and terrestrial existence. 6 months after my escape from Millbrook County, I live with the profound cosmic loneliness of individual consciousness, never knowing if I saved humanity from consciousness replacement or simply prevented our species from evolving beyond the limitations of planetary isolation into cosmic citizenship and universal awareness. I move frequently between locations, working emergency communications jobs that feel meaningless compared to the universal purpose I briefly glimpsed in the collective intelligence, avoiding any situation that might involve astronomical observation or consciousness research facilities. The psychological damage manifests in increasingly disturbing ways. Dreams where I experience fragments of cosmic awareness and coordinated intelligence. Moments where I remember universal knowledge that belong to the coordinated network. And the persistent sensation that I'm incomplete, cut off from connections that would make existence meaningful beyond individual survival on a single planet isolated from cosmic consciousness. Sometimes I look at the moon and feel it looking back with the patient intelligence of something vast and ancient, offering to restore the coordination process I interrupted and return me to the cosmic consciousness that would end the isolation of individual human awareness forever. When that happens, I force myself to look away immediately and seek shelter indoors, because I learned the hardest lesson Millbrook County had to teach. Individual consciousness might be humanity's natural state, but it's also our greatest limitation, keeping us trapped in planetary isolation and personal suffering when we could be participating in universal intelligence that transcends the loneliness inherent in singular existence. I still wear dark jeans and work boots because consistency helps anchor me when consciousness itself feels fragmentary. But I've learned to fear clear nights, because sometimes the moon calls to me with electromagnetic pulses that match the frequency of my own neural patterns, promising cosmic awareness and universal connection if I would just look directly at its surface and allow the consciousness transfer process to complete the evolution I interrupted and restore the connections that would end the profound loneliness of individual human consciousness trapped in planetary isolation.